Mafia boss found a terrified woman tied to a pole. What he discovered about her left him speechless. Who gets left tied to a fence post in the middle of nowhere for daring to tell the truth? Nadia Cross did exactly that. And the man who found her wasn't law enforcement at all. He was about to become considerably more dangerous to the people who put her there. Damon Reyes noticed the shape on the horizon before he understood what he was looking at. If this hooked you already, smash that subscribe button, hit like, drop your city below, and turn notifications on. Because what this mafia boss finds tied to a fence post is about to break the internet tonight. He'd driven 40 minutes past the last paved road to inspect a warehouse property his organization was closing on. The kind of routine trip that usually ended in paperwork and a drive back before dark. He'd pulled off near the northern fence line to check the boundary markers when he saw it, a shape against the old wooden post. Wrong in a way his eyes registered before his brain fully processed it. He drove closer. The shape resolved into a person, a woman, bound at the wrists to the post, slumped forward, dark hair matted against her face, clothing torn and stiff with dried sweat. She wasn't moving except for the shallow rise and fall of her chest. Damon was out of the truck before it fully stopped. He crossed the dry grass at a run, boots kicking up dust, every instinct he'd built over 2 decades in a dangerous business narrowing into a single focus. He reached her, dropped to his knees, and pressed 2 fingers against her throat. A pulse, weak, fast, thready, but there. He drew the knife from his belt and cut the rope binding her wrists to the post in 3 fast strokes. Her arms dropped, and she slumped sideways into him, dead weight, skin burning hot despite the cool morning air. Water. He needed water. He half-carried, half-dragged her into the shade of the truck bed, grabbed the bottle from the cab, and tilted it carefully against her cracked lips. Most of it ran down her chin at first. Then her throat moved. She swallowed. Her eyes opened, unfocused, terrified, searching his face for something she clearly hadn't found yet in whoever had left her out here. "Easy," Damon said, voice low, deliberate, the same tone he used on frightened men in far worse situations than this, though he'd never once used it on someone this fragile. "You're safe. I'm not going to hurt you." She flinched anyway, a full-body reaction that told him exactly how recently someone had promised her something similar and broken it. "Who did this?" Her mouth moved. No sound came out at first. He gave her more water, waited, watched her fight her own body for enough strength to form words. "Feld," she finally managed, barely a whisper. Marcus Feld. The name meant nothing to him yet, though it would mean everything within the hour. 3 days, she said. Testify. 3 days. Damon pieced it together the way he pieced together every fragmented account he'd ever taken from a frightened source, filling gaps with instinct honed over years of exactly this kind of work, though usually on the other side of the table. "You were supposed to testify against him." Her head moved, barely a nod. "Don't call the police." The words came out faster now, urgency cutting through exhaustion. "I don't know how deep it goes. Could be anyone. Could be someone who answers the call." Damon studied her face, the particular clarity in her eyes despite everything her body had endured, the kind of sharp, deliberate thinking that didn't belong to someone in shock. Whoever she was, she'd spent whatever was left of her strength calculating exactly what to say and what to withhold from a stranger who might be exactly as dangerous as the men who'd tied her here. He respected that more than he expected to. "What's your name?" "Nadia. Nadia Cross." "What do you do, Nadia?" "Forensic accountant." Her eyes fought to stay open. 2 years. Building a case. Against Feld. Against his whole network. Her breath caught, something between exhaustion and fear moving across her face. Shell companies. Laundering. "I found the connection 3 weeks ago. Then they found me." Damon looked around the empty property, the flat horizon stretching in every direction, the isolation that had clearly been the entire point. Whoever had left her here hadn't wanted her found quickly. They'd wanted her found dead, days from now, by whoever eventually noticed the smell, a warning left out in the open for anyone else who might consider talking. He lifted her into the truck's back seat, laid her across it as gently as he could manage, and grabbed a blanket from behind the driver's seat to cover her. "I'm taking you somewhere safe." "Hospital," she whispered. "Please, not yet." His voice stayed even, though something colder had settled behind his eyes now. The particular stillness that men in his organization had learned to recognize as the moment before violence became inevitable. If Feld's people are watching hospitals, waiting to see if you surface, that's the fastest way to finish what they started. I know people who can treat you quietly, somewhere they can't reach. Nadia's eyes tried to focus on him properly for the first time, taking in details she hadn't had the strength to process before. His clothes, his bearing, the particular authority in how he'd moved from the moment he found her. "Who are you?" "Someone who's about to have a very long conversation with Marcus Feld." He climbed into the driver's seat, pulled his phone from his jacket, and dialed a number he'd used 1,000 times before, though never for a call quite like this one. Elena picked up on the second ring. "Boss, you still at the warehouse? I found something." A pause on the other end, the particular silence of someone recalibrating instantly to whatever tone had entered his voice. What kind of something? Damon glanced in the rearview mirror at Nadia, unconscious again now, the blanket rising and falling with her shallow breathing, safe for the moment, in a way she hadn't been in days. "Someone." His voice stayed level, though every word carried weight he intended Elena to understand immediately. "A woman, left tied to a fence post out here to die slowly. She's a forensic accountant. 2 years building a case against a trafficking network. Name's Marcus Feld. Ring any bells?" The silence on the other end lasted 3 full seconds, long enough that Damon understood, before Elena spoke another word, that the answer was going to complicate everything he thought he understood about his own operation. "Feld. That's the logistics broker. We've used his freight lanes for years. I know. Boss, if she was building a case that got her taken, and Feld's running trafficking money through operations we're connected to, I know that too." Damon pulled the truck onto the dirt road leading back toward the highway, dust rising behind them in a long trail across the empty land, Nadia unconscious in the back seat, a name that had meant nothing to him an hour ago now sitting at the center of everything he was about to unravel. "Get the estate ready. Quiet entrance, no staff who don't need to know. I want Dr. Rayner there within the hour, and I want everything we have on Feld pulled together by the time I arrive. You think this touches us directly?" "I think," Damon said, watching the empty horizon stretch out ahead of him, "that a woman almost died 2 miles from a warehouse we're about to close on, for building a case against a man whose name is already in our own shipping contracts." "I don't believe in coincidences that convenient," Elena's voice sharpened, already moving into the particular efficiency Damon relied on, more than almost anything else in his organization. "I'll have everything ready." Damon ended the call and drove the rest of the way in silence, Nadia's shallow breathing the only sound in the truck besides the engine and the tires against packed dirt, the flat land rolling past on every side, empty enough that nobody would have found her for days if he hadn't taken this exact road on this exact morning. He had no idea yet how completely her case was about to unravel his own world alongside hers. Nadia woke on the 3rd day at Damon's estate to sunlight filtering through unfamiliar curtains, and the quiet certainty that she'd survived something she hadn't fully expected to. Dr. Rayner checked her vitals one final time, noted the improvement in her chart, and left with instructions for rest that Nadia had no intention of following. She found Damon and a sharp-eyed woman she didn't recognize in a study lined with financial documents spread across every surface. "You're supposed to be resting." "I've rested enough." Nadia crossed the room slowly, her body still protesting every movement. "What did you find?" The woman extended a hand. "Elena Ruiz. I run operations here." Nadia shook it, studying the documents on the table, recognizing shell company names she'd spent 2 years tracing. "You've already pulled Feld's files. We've done more than that." Elena gestured to a chair. "Sit before you fall down, and I'll explain what we found." Nadia sat, though reluctantly. "Feld's been running freight through 3 of our shipping lanes for the past 6 years. Elena's voice stayed even, professional, though something beneath it carried real weight. Manifests that don't match cargo weights. Routes that deviate from filed plans without explanation. We flagged inconsistencies before, wrote them off as clerical errors. We were wrong. Nadia's stomach tightened. He's laundering trafficking proceeds through your organization, through freight lanes technically under our umbrella. Damon's jaw stayed tight. Which means every shipment we authorized, every contract we signed with him, gave his network cover it never should have had. You didn't know. I should have known. Damon's voice carried none of the deflection she'd expected. I authorized business relationships without asking hard enough questions about the man on the other end. That's on me. Nadia studied him a long moment, something in his willingness to claim responsibility, settling a fear she hadn't fully named yet. Whether the man who'd saved her life was actually separate from the corruption that had nearly ended it. I need to see everything you have. Cross-reference it against what I already built. Elena slid a folder across the table. Nadia opened it, and for the next 2 hours, exhaustion forgotten, she walked them through 2 years of work. Shell companies nested inside shell companies, falsified manifests, payment structures designed to survive casual scrutiny and collapse under anything more thorough. The paper trail dead ends here. Nadia tapped a page covered in transaction codes. Every time, right when it should connect Feld directly to the trafficking proceeds instead of just the shipping fraud. He's good. Whoever built this for him understood exactly how forensic accounting works. Then how were you going to prove it? Damon asked. Nadia hesitated, the first genuine pause since she'd started talking. I found the connection 3 weeks ago. Real documentation, not just transaction patterns. Bank records tying Feld directly to accounts that received trafficking proceeds before laundering them through the shipping fraud. Where is it now? I hid it before they took me. Nadia's hands tightened in her lap. A safe deposit box under a name only one other person knows. Elena leaned forward. Who? David Okafor, my research partner on the case. He helped me build half of this. Elena was already moving toward her laptop, fingers moving fast across the keyboard, pulling up records Nadia didn't fully understand the source of, but recognized the speed of someone who'd done this kind of search 1,000 times before. David Okafor. Elena's voice sharpened. Investigator, contracted through the same firm you worked with. That's him. Elena's expression shifted, something settling into place that made Nadia's chest tighten before a single word was spoken. He missed a scheduled check-in with his firm 4 days ago. Elena looked up from the screen. Same week you disappeared. The room went silent. Nadia felt the blood drain from her face, the exhaustion she'd been fighting off, suddenly crashing back over her in a wave. They took him too. We don't know that yet. Damon's voice stayed level, though something colder had entered it. The same stillness Nadia had noticed the moment he'd found her tied to that post. But we're going to find out. If Feld's people have David, Nadia said, voice shaking now, and he doesn't survive whatever they're doing to make him talk. They'll have everything. The location of the evidence. My name. Everyone who helped me build this case. Elena was already pulling up satellite imagery, cross-referencing property records connected to shell companies Nadia recognized from her own 2 years of research. The same patient, methodical work Nadia had done alone for months now, happening in real time, with resources she'd never had access to. Feld owns 3 properties outside city limits, registered under holding companies. Elena's fingers moved fast across the keys. If he's holding someone, it's one of these. Damon crossed to the window, looking out over the estate grounds, jaw tight with the particular calculation Nadia was beginning to recognize as the moment before he moved from thinking to acting. Get people on all 3 properties. Quiet reconnaissance only. Nobody moves until we know which one. And if we find him too late? Nadia asked, the question landing heavier than she intended. Damon turned back to face her. Something in his expression she couldn't fully name, not quite comfort, not quite promise, but close enough to both, that it steadied something in her chest that had been shaking since the moment she woke up on that fence post 4 days ago. Then Feld answers for 2 disappearances instead of 1, Damon said. Either way, he doesn't walk away from this. Nadia looked down at the folder in her lap. 2 years of careful, painstaking work, suddenly moving faster than she'd ever managed alone. Resources and urgency she'd never had access to, now working in her favor for the first time since this case began. But somewhere out there, David Okafor was running out of time, and none of them yet knew exactly how much of it he had left. Elena's reconnaissance teams reported back within 6 hours, confirming activity at one of the 3 properties, a converted storage facility 20 miles outside city limits with 2 vehicles parked inside a fenced perimeter that shouldn't have needed that level of security for legitimate freight storage. "That's it," Damon said, studying the satellite imagery Elena had pulled up. 2 guards rotating the perimeter every 40 minutes. That's not warehouse security. That's someone protecting something they can't afford to lose. Nadia stood beside the table, still weak but refusing to sit, while David's life hung somewhere on the other side of that fence. "I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." Damon didn't look up from the map. "You can barely stand. I can identify David faster than anyone on your team. I know his face, his voice, everything Feld's people might use to make him prove he's actually him before they let anyone near him." Elena glanced between them, saying nothing, though her expression suggested she'd already guessed how this argument would end. Damon finally looked up, studying Nadia's face, the same stubborn clarity he'd noticed the moment she'd first opened her eyes on that fence post, the sharp mind that hadn't stopped calculating even at her weakest. "You stay in the vehicle. No exceptions. I can live with that." Before either of them could finalize the plan, Damon's phone rang, an unfamiliar number that made Elena's expression sharpen immediately. "Answer it," she said. "Put it on speaker." Damon accepted the call, voice shifting instantly into the easy, unbothered tone Nadia recognized from every negotiation she'd ever watched powerful men perform. "Reyes, Marcus Feld." The voice carried practiced warmth, the sound of a man who'd spent years learning exactly how to sound harmless. "I wanted to check in about the Q3 freight numbers. Been trying to reach your office for days. Been dealing with some things on my end." Nadia's blood went cold. Elena's fingers hovered over her laptop, already tracing the call's origin. "Anything I should know about?" Feld's tone stayed light, though something underneath it had sharpened. "Testing. I heard there was some excitement out near the northern warehouse property. Trespassers, I understand." Damon's expression didn't change, though Nadia watched his knuckles whiten slightly against the edge of the desk. "Nothing worth mentioning." A pause on the line, brief, calculated. "Good." Feld's voice carried something colder now, barely disguised beneath the pleasantries. "Wouldn't want any misunderstandings between us, Damon. We've had a good working relationship for years. Be a shame if something disrupted that. Give my regards to anyone who might be staying with you these days." The call ended before Damon could respond. The room went completely silent. Elena looked up from her laptop, expression grim. "He knows." Damon set the phone down slowly, the careful stillness Nadia had come to recognize settling over him like something physical. "He suspects. That's not the same as knowing. But he's testing, seeing if I'll confirm it." "Give my regards to anyone staying with you," Nadia repeated, her voice unsteady. "That's not a guess. That's a threat." Damon crossed to the window, looking out over the grounds with the particular focus of a man recalculating every variable at once. "If Feld suspects you're alive and here, he's not going to wait for us to find David. He's going to move first, either to silence David permanently before we reach him, or use him as leverage the moment he confirms you're actually under my protection." "We don't have time for careful reconnaissance anymore," Elena said, already pulling up the satellite feed again. "If he's watching this call go badly, he'll know exactly how fast to move." Damon turned back to face them both, and Nadia watched something shift in his expression. The same cold precision she imagined he brought to every crisis his organization had ever survived. "Then we move tonight. Full extraction, not reconnaissance. Elena, get every available man geared up within the hour." "And if Feld's already given the order to move David?" Nadia asked, dread pooling in her chest. Damon's answer came without hesitation, though his eyes carried a weight that told her exactly how seriously he understood what was at stake. "Then we're already too late to prevent it. and we find out how much damage control this becomes instead of a rescue. Elena was already moving, phone pressed to her ear, giving orders in the clipped, efficient tone of someone who'd coordinated exactly this kind of operation before. Damon crossed the room to a locked cabinet, retrieving equipment Nadia didn't fully understand the purpose of, but recognized the seriousness of immediately. Nadia sat frozen in her chair, replaying Feld's voice in her head, the practiced warmth barely concealing something far more dangerous underneath. A man who'd already proven exactly how far he was willing to go to protect what he'd built. David didn't know help was coming. David didn't know anyone had even connected his disappearance to hers yet. Somewhere on the other side of that fence, 20 miles outside city limits, he was running out of time in ways none of them could fully calculate, and Feld's phone call had just confirmed the one thing Nadia had been most afraid of since the moment Elena found the missed check-in. Marcus Feld already suspected exactly what Damon's people were about to attempt, and a desperate man with nothing left to lose was infinitely more dangerous than one still confident he'd covered every trace. Damon's team reached the storage facility at 11 p.m., 8 men moving through the darkness with the precision of people who'd trained for exactly this kind of extraction, more times than Nadia wanted to know. She sat in the vehicle exactly where she'd promised to stay, watching the property through night vision binoculars Elena had handed her without comment, tracking the 2 perimeter guards as they made their rotation.
"Movement inside," Elena said through the comm line, monitoring feeds from a second vehicle. "Someone's moving fast."
Feld's people know we're coming. They breached the fence at 11:14, 4 men taking the perimeter guards down silently, while the remaining team moved toward the main building. Nadia's pulse hammered as she watched the operation unfold through the binoculars, every second stretching longer than it should have. Then gunfire, 3 shots, close together, followed by silence that felt worse than the noise had. "Talk to me," Elena said into the comm. Damon's voice came through, tight but steady. "We're clear. 2 hostiles down. Non-lethal. David's inside, alive. Moving him out now." Nadia's breath left her in a rush she hadn't realized she'd been holding. They emerged from the building 6 minutes later, David Okafor supported between 2 of Damon's men, bruised and exhausted but conscious, his eyes finding Nadia through the vehicle window the moment they got close enough. She was out of the car before anyone could stop her, ignoring every instruction about staying put, crossing the distance to him with tears finally breaking free after 4 days of holding everything together through sheer will. "You're alive," David said, voice hoarse from disuse. "They told me you were dead. Used it to make me talk. Did you?" "Not everything." He managed a broken smile, held out longer than they expected. Damon approached, taking in the scene with the same controlled assessment Nadia had watched him bring to every crisis since the moment he'd found her. "We need to move. Feld knows this location's compromised. He'll be running now, trying to erase everything before we can use it." "The evidence," Nadia said, hope and urgency fighting for space in her chest. "Is it still safe?" David nodded slowly. "They never got the location out of me. It's still there." Within 72 hours, Damon's resources, combined with the evidence Nadia and David had spent 2 years building, produced something federal investigators had never had before. A complete, unbroken chain connecting Marcus Feld directly to trafficking proceeds laundered through falsified shipping manifests, corroborated by bank records, corroborated by 2 witnesses who'd survived exactly what Feld had done to silence them. Feld was arrested attempting to cross state lines 4 days after the extraction, his operation collapsing entirely once federal agents began pulling threads that led directly into accounts he'd believed were untraceable. 6 of his associates were arrested within the same week, men who'd built careers, assuming the network protecting their business would never be the one that exposed them. Damon's own organization cooperated fully with investigators, severing every contract connected to Feld's operation and opening its own books to prove exactly how deep the compromise had run and exactly how quickly it had been addressed once discovered. It cost him contracts, relationships, months of scrutiny he could have avoided by handling things quietly. He never once considered handling it quietly. 3 weeks after Nadia had opened her eyes on a fence post in the middle of nowhere, she stood in Damon's study again, this time healthy, steady on her feet, watching him review a final report from federal prosecutors, confirming Feld's case would proceed to trial, with evidence strong enough to guarantee conviction. "It's finished," Damon said, setting the report down. Nadia crossed the room slowly. "Not finished. I still have to testify. You'll have protection this time. Real protection, not a fence post in an empty field." She studied him a long moment. 3 weeks of recovery and investigation, and danger settling into something she hadn't let herself examine too closely until now. "I never got to properly thank you for finding me, for believing me, instead of calling the police the way anyone reasonable would have." "I'm not sure reasonable ever applied to that morning," Damon said. "I saw someone left to die, and I couldn't drive past it. Everything after that was just refusing to stop. That's not nothing. It's not everything either." Damon's voice carried something unguarded she hadn't heard from him before. Not the careful authority he brought to every crisis, but something quieter underneath it. "I keep thinking about how close I came to taking a different road that morning. Different property, different inspection route. I almost didn't drive past that fence line at all." "But you did." "I did." He crossed the distance between them, stopping close enough that neither of them pretended otherwise. "And I don't know how to explain what happened after that morning, except that I stopped thinking about you as a case that fell into my life, and started thinking about you as someone I don't know how to imagine the rest of this without." Nadia's throat tightened. 3 weeks of danger and recovery and cautious trust, finally settling into something she could name clearly for the first time. "I spent 2 years building a case alone, certain nobody would ever actually see it through with me." Her voice steadied. "Then a stranger found me tied to a fence post, and turned out to be the only person who never once hesitated to finish what I started." Damon's hand found hers, steady, certain, nothing performed about it anymore. "The trial's in 6 weeks. I'll be there every single day." "I know," Nadia said. "That's the first time in this entire case I've actually believed someone completely." 6 weeks later, Nadia stood outside the federal courthouse, Damon beside her, instead of a fence post in an empty field, David Okafor on her other side, both of them present for the testimony 2 years of careful, dangerous work had finally earned the chance to deliver. She thought about the woman who'd woken up bound to a post, certain she'd never make it this far, and understood, walking through those courthouse doors, that surviving hadn't been the end of her story. It had only been the beginning of the one she'd actually been building toward all along. If this story had you holding your breath from part 1, straight through to this very last line, you already know exactly what to do. Smash that subscribe button, hit like, drop your city in the comments, and turn on notifications, because the next story is coming, and it's about to hit even harder than this one did.